cresci no interior de Minas Gerais, numa cidadezinha chamada São José do Buriti. É uma cidade muito pequena.
Eu sou de Fortaleza, nascido e criado em Fortaleza. Estudava na escola de bairro, depois mudei para a escola maior.
E eu tinha sonhos de estudar, muito porque minha mãe não tinha tido oportunidade de estudar. E ela sempre me incentivou muito.
Eu sempre estudei em escolas públicas, né? Eu venho de uma família de baixa renda. Ao longo do meu ensino médio, eu cursei ensino técnico em administração, integrado ao médio, numa ETEC do interior de São Paulo.
Eu entrei no site, eu vi que tinha um programa de bolsas. Eu me apaixonei pela escola, me apaixonei pela visão da escola. E eu vi que eu me enquadrava no perfil.
Por acaso, eu acabei conhecendo o Insper, acabei entrando no site do Insper, fiquei completamente apaixonada pelo curso de engenharia que tinha aquela proposta hands-on, aquela proposta mão na massa, uma proposta completamente disruptiva para um curso de engenharia no Brasil, e eu resolvi prestar o programa de bolsas.
Eu descobri o Insper, cara. Eu já estava fazendo faculdade lá em Fortaleza, descobri que existia a faculdade, o Insper, descobri o programa de bolsas, me inscrevi, passei e vim.
No dia que saiu a resposta da bolsa, né, eu estava ansiosa, esperando, falei, meu Deus, o que vai acontecer? Liguei para minha mãe e falei, mãe, passei, já sei qual faculdade que eu quero ir, agora não preciso escolher mais, porque eu tenho certeza que é o Insper.
Eu nunca senti algo antes como aquilo. Para mim era a concretização de todos os sonhos que aquela menina tinha. E naquele momento, eu não sabia que a minha vida ia mudar tanto.
Primeiro, a primeira coisa, se não existisse bolsa, não existia nessa no Insper, entendeu? Não tem como, não fazia, estava muito longe da nossa realidade, então acho que poder entrar numa universidade da qualidade do Insper só foi possível para mim pela bolsa.
O grande objetivo do programa de bolsas, né, do ponto de vista institucional, era trazer diversidade para o corpo discente. Na verdade, criar um corpo discente, construir um corpo discente diverso, de ideias, de propósitos, de visão de mundo.
O que eu acho que é uma das grandes qualidades da população brasileira, que é a capacidade de lidar com a diversidade. E todos nós sabemos a quantidade de talentos que estão por aí mundo afora e que obviamente não têm oportunidade. Aliás, esse é um dos problemas do Brasil, tolerância e oportunidade.
É uma realidade mesmo que a depender do CEP onde você nasce vai destinar seu futuro. Isso é inadmissível.
Todas as pessoas que nascem no Brasil têm que ter as mesmas oportunidades para realizar seus sonhos. Não importa se elas nascem na periferia de São Paulo, na zona rural no Nordeste, em bairros ricos, todos têm que ter a mesma oportunidade.
A gente começou a colocar esforços onde estão esses talentos acadêmicos, porque a questão financeira a escola estava preparada para suprir, e a parte deles era trazer o gosto pelo estudo, a curiosidade intelectual, acreditar na educação como meio de geração de possibilidades para eles na vida, e a gente teve o desafio, então, de investigar e procurar esse pessoal. Até no Ceará a gente foi parar, né?
O mundo ele é muito maior do que essas 8 quadras que cercam a faculdade. E trazer gente de fora, você traz, cara, perspectivas diferentes de problemas, você traz novos problemas para dentro da faculdade. Eu acho que tem um ganho de ter diversidade dentro do corpo de alunos, que é super importante para a formação, tanto como profissionais, mas para a formação cidadã também, que eu acho que a faculdade faz parte disso.
A história do Insper é uma trajetória, as coisas vão acontecendo, é um processo. Então nós temos vários marcos. Um marco importante foi a criação das nossas bolsas não restituíveis integrais. Outro marco aí foi mais gradual, é o engajamento progressivo dos nossos ex-alunos, chamados alumni, no nosso fundo de bolsa. Nós temos um número crescente de alumni que hoje contribuem para o Fundo de Bolsas, o que nos deixa extremamente felizes e orgulhosos. Outro marco importante foi a Toca da Raposa, que foi o primeiro dormitório que nós tivemos aqui no Insper, voltado para os bolsistas integrais.
Para pessoas como eu, que são de fora de São Paulo, existe a Toca da Raposa, né, que é um residencial incrível que foi construído pelo Insper para abrigar esses talentos do país inteiro e conseguir viabilizar que essas pessoas estudem no Insper. Então, é um espaço bastante colaborativo que me possibilita me dedicar integralmente aos estudos no Insper.
O programa de bolsa permite que as pessoas, que esses jovens, consigam atingir seus sonhos, cursar os cursos de interesse numa instituição de excelência. E isso vai refletir em toda a vida desses jovens. Do lado da instituição é muito importante porque Esses alunos trazem um dinamismo grande para a escola.
O Insper também é um sonho de quem acredita no Brasil, né? Eu acho que aí todo mundo sai um pouco imbuído dessa vontade de fazer diferença, levando esse senso de pertencimento, esse olhar pragmático para onde a gente vai depois de sair aqui do 4A300.
Insper, na realidade, vem de inspirar e pertencer. Então, esse pertencer que nós queremos realmente colocar os nossos alunos, que eles pertencem à nossa comunidade. Eles, na realidade, estão ligados à escola perenemente.
Então, a gente colocou muita energia em criar esse senso de comunidade, de engajamento, de amor à camisa, que é independentemente de qualquer contrato, é em outro lugar que está esse compromisso.
Meu sonho também é poder adotar alguém como mentora, como madrinha para o programa de bolsas e poder devolver ao Insper tudo que eu recebi.
Eu posso acompanhar hoje como doador, como parceiro do Insper, iniciativas, né? Ter essa troca e poder ajudar pessoas que vêm de uma realidade parecida com a minha, acho que isso para mim é muito legal.
É um grande desafio e nós estamos aqui no Insper, dentro do nosso microcosmo, que é ensino superior, dentro daquilo que nós achamos que podemos fazer bem e adicionar valor, procurando fazer o melhor para contribuir para esse fim.
E eu espero que o programa de bolsas esteja apenas começando, porque é claro que todos nós aqui temos um limite, mas ele de fato cria, enfim, impactos mais que proporcionais.
É muito bom pensar no futuro do programa, né? Daquilo que a gente colhendo os benefícios do que evoluiu até aqui, e o que a gente espera, o que a gente sonha para frente.
Eu acho que hoje trabalhar com a educação é pensar que a oportunidade não pode ser só para alguns, não pode ser para o aluno que já está engajado, tem que ser para engajar um aluno também.
Tem que pensar grande, tem que sonhar. Quanto mais jovens a gente forma, né? Quanto maior a oferta, né, de um programa desse para esses jovens, maior o impacto potencial para o nosso país.
To present the webinar on, just a minute, on smart cities, transferring the Amsterdam approach to the Brazilian context. And for today, we will have Professor Guido van Os and Cornelia Dinca discussing with you this program that Insper and Amsterdam University has put together. And that is a result of a long-term cooperation and debates that bring together solutions, governance models, and social inclusion aspects and prospects from one of the cities that have been a leading smart city in the world, Amsterdam, to Brazil and to developing cities, right? Cornelia is actually the liaison for the Amsterdam Smart City, and she, just a minute, please. I'm sorry. And she has a vast experience on smart cities, and and she's has worked with the innovation and created this smart city, Amsterdam Smart City, an innovation platform residing under the Amsterdam Economic Board, which brings together government, companies, knowledge institutions, and civil society organizations. Cornelia is responsible for connecting international stakeholders to relevant smart city experts and projects in the Amsterdam metropolitan region, and facilitate the transfer of knowledge and to kickstart new collaborations. She has a degree in chemical engineering and from the University of Calgary, and she a master's in urban and regional planning from the University of Amsterdam. And Professor Guido is a senior lecturer within the urban management track at Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences and teaches policy science, policy management, and governance within the public administration program, urban management bachelor's and master's program. He actually is the kind of the interface between the ICT and the public administration venues and channels, and with emphasis on the administrative side of digital services and smart cities. His expertise centers on how urban administrative organizations deal with contemporary technological developments, the way ICT changes urban administrative processes, and the impact of technology with regard to how governments interact with business and citizens. So I welcome these two experts on the smart cities and these two partners of Insper in this pursuit of making better places to live, smarter places to live, with a richer and healthier and wealthier and happier environment. That is part of the plan of the Laboratório de Cidades, the City Lab, that is a joint initiative between Arquifuturo and the Insper. Okay, and now it's being opening up, has been initiated this year and has a great perspective into next year too. So I welcome both of you. So please, Cornelia and Guido, it's up to you now. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for this kind introduction. Welcome everybody to this lecture of Smart City, Transferring the Amsterdam Approach to the Brazilian Context. This presentation will consist of two parts, a more theoretical part and an introduction of the modules that we will teach in November and December, and a more practical part. I will do an introduction of the course, of the session and the modules, and a more theoretical part, and Cornelia will take you with in the Smart City of Amsterdam, Smart City Amsterdam, and all kinds of projects that are going on in Amsterdam. First of all, when we developed this course, we really wanted to make sure that people, we teach people our experience in Amsterdam. So the tools, the experiences. So that's the main focus of all the modules. Maybe you can go to the slide of the modules. So we made a course. Actually, it's 6 modules, 5 more or less theoretical, practical modules where we go in depth in some areas, and a 6th module where there's a more practical case where whereas the participants in the course will use all the tools and all the insights of the Amsterdam approach in a more Brazilian context case. But 5 modules. The first one will be taught by Cornelia. It's about metropolitan transitions, all the opportunities, but also the pitfalls of smart city developments. I will teach the second one, innovation ecosystem. And it's more or less about new governance structures within a smart city, because there's a lot of change. So you have to adjust as a public administration, but also as a stakeholder who wants to participate in smart city projects. Module 3 is about responsible digitization. So it's more about the juxtaposition between technical choices and ethical issues when using digital tools in public policy. Module 4 will be more on the economical side, how to use relevant business cases when creating smart city projects. And the last one is a very important one, is how to engage citizens when developing smart city projects, but also how to make sure that citizens also feel a sense of ownership when they are part of a smart city project. But first of all, I think it's, before we go to the practical things of Smart City Amsterdam, it's okay to present a more theoretical framework, which is the base of this course. It's good to mention that in Amsterdam, there's tradition when making policy to cooperate with each other. So it's a co-creation tradition. So it's not only the municipality who's responsible for making public policy, but there are a lot of stakeholders are involved in making policy. Citizens, other stakeholders, public organizations. So that's the Amsterdam tradition, doing cooperating, co-creating when making policy solutions. When you become a smart city like Amsterdam, that tradition of co-creation is changing, will change. And that's what we call institutional change. The tradition are informal use, how we interact with each other, how stakeholders interact with each other. And when cities become smart, and IT will be introduced in that setting, new stakeholders will be part of the governance structure. So that means that new interaction will come about. So there will be new strategic interactions between stakeholders, and the governance structure will change. So if a city becomes smart and you will introduce IT in the policy process, the tradition of cooperating, co-creating will change. So that's institutional change. However, if there is an institutional change, this has also an effect on how public professionals interact with each other. And that's what we call an organizational change. Public professionals will participate in networks with new stakeholders, more IT-driven stakeholders. So they have to learn new skills and maybe have to learn new knowledge to make sure that they can cooperate with the new stakeholders in the network. So on the one hand, there's an institutional change, which means a new governance setting, and there's an organizational change, which means a new skills and new knowledge for public professionals who participate in smart city projects. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and these are the two main transformations. What I said, the institutional transformation, a new governance setting, a new policy arena with citizens who are more engaged in IT and more IT-driven stakeholders, and an organizational side with new tools for public professionals, new forms of co-creation in redefined networks, because there are new IT-driven stakeholders and also smart citizens who are participating in those networks. But also public professionals have to learn to develop smart solutions, but also how to use them. Within an organization, the more strategic positioned stakeholders will participate in the networks and creating smart city projects, but there is also an executive branch who will use the tools. So they have to learn new skills and new knowledge. Cornelia, maybe you can go back to the slide of the course, the modules. What I told, there's an institutional change and a more organizational change. And that's also what you see in the different modules. You can say module 1 and module 2 will focus mainly on the tradition and opportunities of smart cities, but also the new networks and new strategies and interaction between stakeholders. The other three modules will focus on the more organizational side. How, as a public professional, is it possible to handle the ethical issues of digitization? How, as a professional, can I make business cases or economical choices when developing smart cities? And more important, the last one, how can I make sure that users and citizens are involved and get a sense of ownership in smart city projects? So the first two will focus on the more institutional change, and 3, 4, and 5 will focus more on the organizational change. Based on the experience in Amsterdam and the Amsterdam approach, we want to offer a lot of tools that the public professional can use in their own practice. The next, the Amsterdam Innovation Arena. Well, I talk about a new approach and a new smart city approach, new networks. On one example, Cornelia has many other examples. One example where you see that different stakeholders work together and co-create is the Amsterdam Innovation Arena. Well, this is the stadium of Ajax Amsterdam football club. And it's in an area where there's a stadium, there's a movie theater, but there's also stages where there's all kinds of music and that sort of thing. So it's a really crowded area. And surrounding and there's a lot of football matches, a big train station. So there's a lot of activity going on in this area in Amsterdam. And the Amsterdam Innovation Arena is a living lab where different stakeholders, the Amsterdam Arena, but also municipality authorities, residents, visitors, knowledge institutions, but also technology firms collaborate in developing all kinds of smart solutions. Smart solutions that will increase safety and security, and so crowd control and that sort of things. Smart solutions to gain sustainability and to increase fans experience. And it's all developed together. This is a collaboration between the different stakeholders to test out all kinds of new solutions in this area, a solution that can be used in other sides of this, in other parts of the city. But this is really a new tradition, a new network where all kinds of different stakeholders collaboratively develop all kinds of new technology and smart solution in a specific area in the city of Amsterdam. This is an example of a new institutional setting where different stakeholders cooperate with each other. Well, Cornelia will have some more examples later on in the discussion. Next slide. Yeah. So what I said, the course is, we have a theoretical base of institution and organizational change, but there's also a lot of experience from the Amsterdam approach. And if you be part of the course, you will be handed out some transferable tools that you can use in your own practice, in your own work practice. And the focus is on multi-stakeholders collaboration and how you can create a sense of ownerships. Well, some examples of tools is we will introduce certain adaptive network strategies within smart city projects. How can you make sure that all stakeholders will cooperate and will collaborate in the network? But also citizen engagement. What tools can you use to make sure that citizens want to interact, but also get a sense of ownership, that they part of the project, and it's important to keep the project alive and to participate and use all the solutions. And of course, we will share our experiences about creating living labs, urban living labs, and how you coordinate those living labs, and you make sure that this is a safe area to experiment with all kinds of new solutions and smart solutions. So if you are being part of this course, you will get a
Is there any problem?
He will maybe pop back in. And in any case, we were coming close to the end of his presentation. So I'll try to make a bridge as much as possible to the next part.
Perfect.
And maybe just to pick up where there is Guido again. So maybe Guido, if you can hear us again.
Sorry, I had some technical issues.
Okay, welcome back.
Well, yeah, thank you. Well, the last slide, like I said, is built on experiences of all kinds of developments in Amsterdam. But also at the University, Amsterdam University of Applied Science, we do a lot of research on smart city development, smart city projects. And we also created some lessons learned from different smart city projects we did research on. And
I'm guessing that we lost, it seems maybe we've lost Guido again. When you talk about smart cities and of course that's when the technology fails you, so it's not perfect, even in Amsterdam. Monica, is it a good idea if I take over?
Yes, perfect. Go ahead,
Yes?
Cornelia.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so what I thought I would do then for the second part of the presentation is to give you a little bit more insight in Amsterdam Smart City and the ecosystem that we operate in. And I hope this, again, gives you a bit of an idea of the topics that will be covered in the course, but also some of the practical examples of projects that we would like to share and go in depth in the course as well. So to give you some context, you see here the evolution of Amsterdam Smart City, a bit of a timeline. I'm not going to go in detail, but what I wanted to highlight is that the program started out in 2009, so we're more than 10 years old. And from the beginning, the idea was about using new technologies, especially digital tools, to engage with citizens in the energy transition. And what's important to underline is that even though the city of Amsterdam was involved from the beginning, they were not per se the initiator. It was Alliander, this is the grid operator, the electricity grid operator, together with Amsterdam Innovation Motor, which was an organization responsible for facilitating what we call triple helix innovation. And that refers basically to bringing governments, companies, and knowledge institutions together to innovate through collaboration. And also, as Guido mentioned, there is already in the Netherlands a culture or a history for these different parties to collaborate together, but you have to constantly work on it. It's not something that happens on its own. It's not enough to say this is in the culture. There takes a lot of effort to really bring these parties together and work together. And what I want to just point out with this timeline is to say that we started out really doing these concrete projects and pilots with a focus on engaging citizens on their energy use and helping them reduce their energy use. But that was very much dependent on a European subsidy in the first couple of years. And at the end of that European subsidy, there were a lot of discussions, how can the program stand on its own 2 feet? And in order to create this kind of sustainable model in the Netherlands, quite often there's a choice for a public-private partnership approach. So that's also that was also the choice in this case. So the program is structured in 3 or 4 year cycles with public and private partners that decide what are the, let's say, the priorities, or what is the vision, or what should we focus on. And for the last few years, our role has really been as an ecosystem builder. So really what we do is to bring together public and private partners. So the government and the companies, but also knowledge institutions, also civil society organizations, and put them in the same room and stimulate that they work together on 4 societal transitions. And at the moment, we focus on energy, mobility, circular economy, and responsible digitalization as the 4 societal transitions that we work on. In the past, there's also been, for example, a focus on health, but nowadays there are other organizations or other programs that focus on the health transition. So those focus areas also change, let's say, over time. But for the time being, these are still, let's say, 4 important topics in Amsterdam, but I'm sure also in Brazil. And then again, to make it a little bit more concrete, I thought I should just share some examples of projects. And in this case, this is not per se a project, but more an important policy and foundation to give you a sense of how we think about smart cities in Amsterdam. And this is the digital city agenda. So Amsterdam was actually the first city in the Netherlands to launch this kind of agenda. And I think some of the viewers might be a little bit surprised to hear that it's not really so much about specific technologies per se. It's much more about the principles. What kind of digital city do you want to be? And the agenda lays out 3 main ambitions. to be a free digital city, an inclusive digital city, and a creative digital city. And this, again, might sound a little bit abstract. When we talk about a free digital city, for example, also in Amsterdam, there's a long history of thinking about freedom or being very proud of this kind of value, let's say. But what does actually mean in practice when we talk about digitalization? Well, to make it very concrete, one of the things that's very important to the city of Amsterdam is that when you walk through the city, you shouldn't be tracked by cameras, for example. And this is also, on the one hand, easier said than done, because that's also maybe for the course, is to really get into a discussion of these technologies in public space. But a very concrete example of that is that actually anytime you see a camera or any other kind of IoT device that captures data in public space, there is now a sticker on that device that communicates to citizens, to people in the city, what that device, what kind of data it's capturing, and makes transparent for people where they can go and find more information about these devices and what kind of data is being captured. And that's just to give you a bit of an idea of how we think about these things, but also in the course and also online, actually, there's a lot more written about this digital city agenda and different action items and different programs falling under each one of these ambitions. Another example of a project that I like to give quite often, because again, we talk a lot about wanting to engage citizens and have this kind of bottom-up approach to a smart city where we involve all kinds of parties. So it shouldn't just be the government and one or two big corporates, but it should be all kinds of parties, also smaller parties, and also citizens that are involved in building this smart city. And this Hollandse Luchten or Dutch skies project is actually the evolution of earlier projects using low-cost sensors to measure air quality with citizens. So we started with this about 5 years ago using a low-cost sensor kit from Barcelona. But in the meanwhile, VAG, which is one of our partners, and they've been working actually on responsible digitalization for 25 years, you could say, so really pioneering in this field. And now they have developed their own sensor. It's open source, and that's very important to them. So really, it's about citizen science. It's about putting citizens back in control of the technology. The citizens are the ones deciding where do we want to install these sensors? What do we want to do with this data? And part of the project, it's also very much about how do these citizens then engage with policymakers in lobbying, for example, around different policies, around industries that might impact air quality, for example. Another example of a project that I like to share is Schoonschip or Clean Ship in Amsterdam North. And this, you see it also in the photo, is a community of about 100 residents in these floating homes. And it aims to be the most sustainable community, floating community in Europe and possibly also in the world. And it's another really nice example of this bottom-up approach, because this was actually a project initiated by citizens. So a group of citizens that wanted to build their dream community, let's say, in a different way. They started lobbying the government to get a place on the water where they could build this community. But of course, the city government can just let these people build their own homes on a canal. Because if you do it once, then you have to do it with other people as well. So there needed to be a formal tendering process where they needed to bid to have the right to develop this community. And of course, this took a long time, and it was not an easy process. And that's also what you hear if you talk to the people who are really involved. But finally, they've managed to, let's say, build their dream, to make it come true. And there's many things that are quite special about these buildings from a circularity perspective, from a sustainability perspective, from a water and waste management perspective. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight is this microgrid. So this is very unusual, even in the Netherlands, is to actually be able to build your own microgrid. So these homes, they have their solar panels you see on the roof. They also have a home battery where they store the electricity generated. And these batteries are connected to each other in a microgrid. And they are actually the owners of this microgrid. And it might sound quite obvious, but at the same time, this is technically illegal. So they needed a special exemption to be able to actually build this microgrid. And that has everything to do, let's say, with the old rules that are based on old institutions, let's say, and on these centralized systems of energy management, for example. And how can we move to these more decentralized systems or small scale systems that are actually owned by citizens is still not obvious. It's still a lot of work, but you see here an example where that was finally achieved. And in the future, we will need a lot more of these examples, but it also means we really need to change our regulations in order to be able to get there. Another quite different example that I wanted to share is what's called Startup in Residence. And this is a program that the city of Amsterdam started 5 years ago when the city started to, it decided it wanted to be a startup city. Many cities want to be startup cities. But how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you become a startup city? Well, in the case of Amsterdam, they did a few things. One of the things was to actually go to Silicon Valley to learn from them. And they came back with some inspiration from a similar program where the city government defined urban challenges and invited startups to solve them. So that's also what you see here. Actually, this is the latest edition of this program. So it runs every year in the last few years. And the city defines these challenges. It invites the startups to apply, and then there's a selection process, and then the startups go through an incubation program where they sit about 4 months inside the city government, working together with the civil servants that are the owners of these challenges. So the startups don't actually get any funding per se. Sometimes the city will fund a pilot. But the idea is that at the end of that 4 month process, if their solution is sufficiently developed, then the city government becomes the launching customer. And it's been quite a successful program in the sense that it's now scaled to other municipalities in the Netherlands, also to other ministries in the Netherlands. But also there's a lot of learnings that the city government got out of it about how is it possible for civil servants to work with startups, because these are two different worlds and they don't typically mesh together very well. So that's really been a very, very big learning for the city government. So that's also, I think, something that's nice to discuss further, maybe also during the discussion, but also in the course. And I wanted to maybe, I think this is my last example, because this is a very recent project. And again, if we talk about smart cities, then immediately we're thinking about digitalization and algorithms and AI, all topics that are really big topics in Amsterdam also at the moment. And just a few weeks ago, the city of Amsterdam, in a collaboration with the city of Helsinki, have launched an algorithm register. And this is all about making transparent the algorithms used by the city government, to give people the possibility to better understand these algorithms and also to give input and feedback. And why is this so important? Well, in the Netherlands at least, but again, I'm sure this is also a discussion internationally. We've had a lot of, we've had some heated discussions, for example, about predictive policing, about the use of algorithms that might be discriminatory, and how can we make sure that these technologies don't actually widen certain, don't aggravate certain differences, let's say, in society, but actually, how do we make sure that we take the biases out through the use of algorithms, not make them more? So this is a really big challenge. And for now, if you look at the algorithm register, you'll only find, for now, I believe, 3 different algorithms. So you shouldn't expect that all the algorithms are there. But this is another example for the way the city of Amsterdam is committed to this sort of responsible digitalization, making open and transparent the algorithms that it's used, and giving the public the opportunity to also engage in that discussion. So those are the main examples that I wanted to share. But then I think if we have time, Monica, then maybe I will just like to do a small demo also of the community platform, of the Amsterdam Smart City platform. Because when we talk again about smart cities, then immediately we're expecting some kind of dashboards or some kind of demo. So if it's okay with you, I will do that in just a couple of minutes, and then I will let you tell me if we also have time maybe for the small video that I wanted to share.
Yes, Cornelia, please feel free to share the experience of the platform and also the video. I think we have time, and we already have some questions, a few questions online, but I think it would be very interesting for our public.
Okay, very good. So I will keep this brief. It's really actually also an invitation for you to have a look at Amsterdam Smart City. So that's our website, but it's actually also our community platform. So we have more than 8,000 members, and it's again an example of how we try to build this innovation ecosystem. And it's actually a place where anyone can participate. So when you come to the website, if you go on the homepage on updates, you see different kinds of updates. And some of these updates are posted by myself or my colleagues, but anyone can post those. And we actually have active members also from Brazil. So you can also select by the different themes that might be of interest to you. For example, if you choose, let's just say energy as an example, you see an update about this LEAP project, which is all about energy savings in the data center industry, which is a big topic in Amsterdam. You see different kinds of updates, but the main point here again is that anyone can make these updates. And the same, you can have a look at the different events, and some of those are our events, but anyone can post their events here. Same with requests. But the main thing that I wanted to emphasize, because we know most people who come to the platform come for the project page. So here again, you will find projects that are carried out by the City of Amsterdam or some of our other partners, but anyone can share their projects on this platform. And again, just to make it very concrete, if you again, just as an example, choose energy, you see different kinds of projects. And for each one of these projects, you can click on it. You see some information. What is the goal? What are the results? Who initiated this? What can other cities learn? You see some updates in some cases. You see what phase this is in. Is it a concept? Is it being implemented? Is it being evaluated? And you can also click on the team, and then you see the people involved in the project. So if you're also interested in specific kinds of topics or specific kinds of themes, this is a way that you can get closer to the people actually implementing these projects and connect with them. And for every project, you can also click on the comments. And again, that's one way that we facilitate this kind of conversation or interaction. So that's a very, very quick introduction to the platform. Maybe I will stop there. Maybe if there's questions, and I think maybe it's nice to just leave some time for the discussion.
Okay, so do you want to start the discussion? Just a minute. You want to start the discussion now, right? And
I
then
think
you show
so.
the video. Okay.
Or either way, I think we can let's have some discussion. I think that's.
I think it's a good experience. So I will bring a question from Wesley Machado, who is watching us, and his question is like, in countries where is a question that actually, to some extent, is in many of our minds. In countries where the public administration does not have an advanced human capital, is it possible that technology fills such a gap?
Guido, do you want to start maybe?
Can you elaborate more on the question?
I think the Wesley's worry and preoccupation is related to the fact that to be smart, you need a lot of resources, right?
Yeah.
And so if you do not have, and you need people, and you need human capital, human resource, training and capacity building.
Yeah.
But he's particularly worried about human capital. And so if you do not have that, if you do not have the people trained with the, how do we actually do it or implement a smart city, and the technology that is available for smart cities is able to fill the gap of the lack of human capital?
So if it's possible, if you don't have any manpower of the capacity to train people to become smart, that's his question, and can it be fulfilled with new technology to fill that gap?
If you don't have people, if you don't have the people with the capacity, with the training, or if you don't have advanced human capital, so can a technology bridge it and fill the gap?
Well, that's a very good question. Well, the main thing when a smart city, technology, you have to have the manpower and the people to use the technology and to implement the technology. And of course, there are all kinds of examples that you can use technology to bridge some gap because you don't have any manpower in some kind of areas. For example, Amsterdam is also very a touristic city. So many tourists will come to Amsterdam. And that's also a new economy is very interesting. Uber and Airbnb. And what you see is that there are a lot of Airbnb rentals in the city. In the city of Amsterdam, think, okay, that's okay, but it's also a problem because people, there are a lot of tourists in normal living areas, and how can we control that Airbnb is all over the city? What you can do, you can hire people to go out in the streets and knock on doors and check, is this rented out or do people live here? If you can build a technology with a couple of people who will screen the internet and the Airbnb forum to check if there is a rental in some place. So keep an eye on the Airbnb website. So yes, it can be done because you can hire IT professionals who scan the internet to check if Airbnb is active. So you don't have to hire people who go on the street. But on the other hand, there's also you need people to use technology and to make the correct choices when using technology. I hope that's.
And maybe if I can add to that, because I think also the question is also getting a little bit to that kind of for this that techno optimist idea that maybe technology can solve all our problems somehow. And certainly the smart city promise is very much about efficiency and making everything more efficient. And we know that's not always necessarily the case or that obvious. But one thing that I think that I think is really relevant in this discussion also about cities or countries that have limited resources, but also very important for the city of Amsterdam at the moment is to develop more open source technology. So that's a very, very big problem when we talk about smart cities is quite often this issue of vendor lock-in. It's a very big problem that a lot of governments deal with. And how can you move to more open solutions and open standards so that you're not dependent on one vendor where every year you're paying higher and higher fees for the service or the data, for example. So the city of Amsterdam has actually been building its own in-house tech team that's actually developing open source solutions that used to be purchased from private providers in the past. And those are open source, meaning that also other municipalities can use them in the Netherlands, but also internationally. So in this short webinar, we didn't have so much time to really also cover that, but that's absolutely something that I find really inspiring and that I am planning to share also in my module. And I think also Franz Anton will touch on it as well. What are some of these solutions that you can actually use, for example, in Brazilian municipalities that are open source? It's a very, very, very big and very important discussion when we talk about smart cities in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, but also elsewhere in Europe. Actually, Amsterdam is collaborating on this topic a lot with Italian municipalities, also with colleagues in Spain and elsewhere.
Okay, great. Actually, I have a question that maybe would be a follow-up on that, and then I will have another one. And my question would be, like you mentioned, that you have a lot of interaction with the public servants, right? Public administration, and that actually the public officials are the ones who own some of the projects, and then they bring on board the participants, the community. So how do you train workers or public servants? Are you going to teach us how to do that? That would be great.
Well, maybe I can start and then I can let Guido answer as well. I think, of course, we're talking about a short course with six sessions. So from an expectations management, there's only so much we can do, unfortunately. Okay. But I think certainly this kind of lifelong learning element, so continuously developing yourself, is very important if you look at the philosophy of the city of Amsterdam, and that's also the reason why it works together with parties like the University of Applied Science, that is very, very active on this topic. So it's you have to constantly learn and develop. And whether you're in Amsterdam or in Sao Paulo, I think that's really important either way.
Great. I have another question from Rui Rosado. He asks how to leverage the citizens' engagement into smart city projects.
Well, I'm not an expert on citizen engagement, but the most important things, and it's not only for smart cities, but it's important in making sure that citizens interact in the policy process, is to give the citizen, to take him seriously, but also give him a normal an equal spot in the network. What I said before, and what Cornelia also said before, in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands, there's a tradition of cooperating when making policy. So there's also always a governance structure where the municipality stakeholders work together to create policy solutions. And if you want to make sure that citizens are part of that collective, they can engage. They are just part of the network, and they can think of decisions. They can participate. They can make solutions. So that's make sure that they're a real partner in the network. That's what one of the lessons learned. Partnership. It's not different parties stakeholders who constantly fight with each other to make sure that something works, but it's partnership. You have the sense that you do it together. But Martijn de Waal is more an expert of citizen engagement, so module 5 will go far more in depth on that topic. But let's make sure that they are part of the network, and make sure that and not only, it's nice to have citizens on board, but make sure that they can make decisions. They're just one of the developers of policy. And exactly. Bottom-up development. So if citizens have ideas about certain policies, they can start their own network. Go to the municipality of Amsterdam and say, well, I have some problems in my neighborhood, and I have an idea to cope with that problem. Well, okay, come with an idea. What do you need? And then they create their own network, bottom up, to create a solution for the problem in their area.
Exactly. And if I can maybe add to that, so also in Amsterdam, we have a lot of discussions, because there are still, of course, programs or projects where you have kind of the traditional citizen engagement method of showing a plan to the citizens during an engagement session and asking them what they think. So there's different levels of citizen engagement. And what Guido was also saying, so really actually giving the ownership, but also even going as far as giving funding. And I think this is actually also an area where Brazil has a lot of experience, and it's quite famous, I think, for the participatory budgeting historically. I'm not sure how it's going nowadays. But in Amsterdam, this is a topic that the city is taking very seriously in the last few years. Actually, one of my favorite examples of this kind of open source solutions is what's called Open City. And this is an open source participatory budgeting platform where citizens suggest ideas on different themes in their neighborhood. And then citizens get to vote on the ideas, and the ideas with the highest number of votes actually get funding to implement those ideas. So citizen engagement is, let's say, very multi-layered. There's different ways that you can do it. But what you're trying to get to is really more than just informing and really actually giving ownership. And this is not always easy, even in Amsterdam. Even now we're having discussions about things like citizen assemblies. And it doesn't go automatically. So even you still need to lobby, and it takes a lot of time, and people think, oh, it's going to be too difficult. But yeah, these are some of the ways. And like Guido said, there's an entire module to go really in a lot of more discussion on this topic.
And to go in depth, the discussion that's important. The discussion that's ongoing in Amsterdam to what can we do to make sure that citizens participate in that sort of things. That's also important to make sure that citizens have a place in those networks and policy processes. So always keep in contact with citizens, give them a serious role in the process.
Okay.
Serious position.
Great. Actually, Rui Rosado continues his complements his question and asks, like, all of this, what is the crucial aspect in terms of infrastructure? Is it the video cam, the open internet, or central database? What is the crucial, the most important, physical not physical, but infrastructure that needed to a smart city?
Well, in the Netherlands, we are lucky that we have a very advanced IT infrastructure. So in terms of internet connections and that sort of things, it's really stable and fast internet. So that's very important to, in the first place. If citizen can be online, that's one important thing. So that's a lucky thing. So we have a stable internet infrastructure. Cornelia, maybe you can elaborate more on the question.
Yeah, I think indeed there's kind of a lot. We would need more time to kind of discuss the whole data infrastructure and why Amsterdam in the Netherlands is a hub for data centers and how that's come about. Actually, we kind of almost take that for granted. One of the things that I would add to that, once you have a certain basic level of technology, one of the things that we say in Amsterdam is actually that we're probably not the leaders when it comes to tech, actually. So Singapore, I think there are maybe other examples of places that are more advanced technologically than we are. But what is really important in Amsterdam, especially in the last few years, is that we really think about the social dimension and about these new technologies never really being neutral, right? So all of these technologies, if you talk about AI or other kinds of technologies, you can use them for good, but you can also use them for bad. So how do we make sure that we actually digitalize in a responsible way? So the social element and the inclusive element is really important in this discussion. So it's not just about the tech, because actually the technology goes really fast. It's really about how do we use this technology and how do we use it responsibly. And that's in many cases even more difficult than the technology itself, I would say.
Okay, great. I have a question that is going to hook with this one. That's from Charles Kirschbaum, a professor at Insper, actually. And he's asking, what do you visualize or you think as the main obstacles to replicate the Amsterdam experience in other places, in other cities?
Yeah, I think the really short answer is institutions and culture. And I think Guido can give a very long version of that answer. But none of these things happen in a vacuum. It's always this kind of the history and the context it makes a huge difference. And I think all of these things that we're talking about is very much about mindset. So even if we talk about how can different departments integrate their data infrastructures, for example, it's a technological question, but the technology part is very easy. The issue is that these departments are not willing to collaborate, or it becomes really an issue of that's much, again, back to the human element in many cases, and power and all these other elements that are so much more difficult, let's say, to give an answer to than the technology itself. Guido, I don't know if you'd like to maybe add to that.
Yeah, it's what Cornelia, that's an institutional dilemma. Cities and countries are different. They have different cultures, different traditions. And like I said before, in Amsterdam, we have always had a tradition of co-creation. And if you want to create an inclusive smart city with collaboration, you have also the tradition is in place. So it becomes smart and there are new stakeholders, but you have a tradition of co-creation. And if you want to implement the tradition of creation in a country where it's not the main way of working, well, that's difficult. So you have to make sure that you know what kind of institutions are in place, what kind of structures, administrative structures are in place. And sometimes you cannot transfer it completely, but you can learn from other approaches and try to look, hey, how can I adjust them to make them more usable in my case, my scenario, my administrative structure, and my institutional setting.
Great.
But it's very important to keep in mind the structure will always be different. So that's
excellent.
Important to keep in mind.
I have another question here from Ravi Afonso, and he's a Brazilian doing a master program in Sweden. And he's asked, which technology has been used to manage and give to tourists more experience in tourism in the tourism area in Amsterdam?
Which technology is used to give a better touristic experience in Amsterdam? I think that's the question, if I understood correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, it's about tourism and how tourism has been able to how actually smart technology has given a better experience to tourists.
Yeah, well, I think it's a question that can be answered in many different ways, and it depends a lot on who answers the question as well. Maybe one thing to add on this, and that's something that actually the Chief Technology Officer of the City of Amsterdam, Baron, who was also the founder of Amsterdam Smart City, at one point he has said actually that Airbnb has had a bigger impact on the City of Amsterdam than any technology or program that the city has come up with. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. So again, we want to maybe say that we have some kind of nice solutions, but in fact, it's playing catch up or reacting to a lot of, let's say, market developments in many cases. Depending on who you ask, they will tell you that Airbnb has been a great thing for the city. Others will tell you it's been the biggest disaster for the city. But I think something as basic as Airbnb or Google Maps, we have it all in our pocket, and it's something that's revolutionized or changed tourism, I think, not just in Amsterdam, but all over the world. We've had, the city had for a very long time a priority to try to disperse tourists. So we had we perceived the problem to be too many tourists at a key location, maybe in the red light district or the museum square. And if we could only just spread the tourists out to different locations, then we wouldn't have this problem anymore. Well, we had a lot of pilots and projects with technology to disperse tourists. Most of them not overly successful, maybe some slightly successful, but a lot of them not overly successful. And yeah, of course, now Corona has fixed that problem for the time being, at least. So yeah, I can't think of any really amazing solution per se, but of course there are also, so there's some AR experiences, for example, for not just tourists, but also Dutch people can go to it. Or I'm off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that's really stands out. But I hope that gives maybe some answer. I don't know, Guido, if you'd like to add.
No, I agree, especially about Airbnb and that sort of things. It's a good thing, but also a bad thing. And so no, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, great. I have one more question, and where would you rather show the video, Cornelia?
Sure. I think if you want to have maybe if there's only one question left, or there's more questions, but we just don't have time.
There is one question left. It's about what is the role of the state in smart city projects, in your view? And are the smart city projects paid by the state?
Well, Amsterdam is a real big metropolitan area. And what you see is that most initiatives of smart city projects is within the Amsterdam area. And there are public-private partnerships because what I said before, in the Amsterdam innovation arena, there are a lot of stakeholders who are participating in those projects and who are also invest in those projects with money or technology or knowledge. So it's not that the state has a lot of control of what happens. However, they can control which stakeholders will participate, because there were, if there's a discussion about a certain IT company, the state can ask questions about why are you cooperating with that company, and why are they such a big role in your city? But more or less, and maybe Cornelia, maybe you can elaborate a little bit further. But I think most things will just bottom up in the city, will create it, and partners will be connected, and there will be some public-private partnerships within the city of Amsterdam, and sometimes with cooperation of the state, but it's not always. Amsterdam can operate quite independently from the state of the Netherlands.
Yeah, so I think in this case, just to make sure, I think the question about the state is about the national government, right? So I think is that correct, Monica? How you interpreted also the question, the role of the national government? Yeah, in the Netherlands, the national government is not very strong. Again, this is maybe quite different in other countries that are more centralized. Even in France, for example, you have a much more powerful central government. Again, that has also to do with history and culture and all these kinds of things. In the Netherlands, one thing that I think is interesting about the national government is the way it played a role in creating this national smart city strategy. And it was actually about trying to somehow bring together the cities and get them to work together instead of always fighting with each other about trying to have more visibility. So the role of the national government actually was a bit of a cheerleader, a bit of a facilitator, is to say, hey, can we come up with a way where instead of always Amsterdam and Rotterdam, having this kind of competition, which is very normal, I think also with Rio and Sao Paulo, how can we find a way that they work together? And in this smart city strategy, national smart city strategy, which again was kind of developed bottom up with these cities, but also with companies and knowledge institutions, each city gets a different kind of focus area. So Amsterdam is in the lead of the circular economy. Eindhoven is in the lead for mobility, Rotterdam for resilience, The Hague for safety and security, and Utrecht for healthy living. And of course, all these cities are also working on other themes, but the idea is that each city is kind of leading the way or showing some best practices and sharing those best practices with everyone else in a way that it's complementary instead of everyone trying to be the number one for mobility, for example. And so I think the short answer is, the role of the national government is much more as a sort of facilitator, but even in Amsterdam, we have a lot of discussions on a local level about the local government shifting from a provider to a facilitator. And it's I think, again, part of this mindset discussion that it shouldn't just be the government, it should really about the government is kind of inviting more and more parties at the table. The table gets bigger and bigger with traditionally bigger parties, but now also smaller parties who should have a say and who should be able to contribute on shaping the city of the future ultimately.
Great. Cornelia, maybe we can use a few minutes to show the video if you want.
Absolutely.
We are running out of time.
Absolutely. I think for both of us, it's okay to just take 3 minutes to share this video with you. And I hope that just provides a sort of extra inspiration for this Amsterdam approach. So let me see if I can... one more. Oops, no, sorry. Try again, I think. So maybe to give you just a very little, can you, sorry, can you see the video screen? Can you see yes?
Yeah.
So this is a video that was created already about 3 years ago. So it's a little bit old, but I think still relevant. It's the legacy of Amsterdam winning the Innovation Capital Award. And it explains a little bit the reason why Amsterdam won this award and how we try to use that prize money, about €1 million, to further intensify this kind of bottom-up and citizen-centric way of creating a city of the future with many different parties involved. So I'm just going to play that.
Great.
Als ik denk aan de stad van de toekomst, dan zie ik veel meer een gelijke stad. Een stad waarin mensen elkaar veel makkelijker ontmoeten.
Mijn stad van de toekomst is een hele groene stad waar het heel prettig leven is voor iedereen. Dus niet alleen voor mensen die het kunnen betalen, maar ook voor mensen met een kleine beurs.
Mijn stad van de toekomst is een stad waar iedereen meedoet, zijn verantwoordelijkheid neemt en meehelpt zijn eigen directe leefomgeving vorm te geven.
Wat interessant is aan Amsterdam is dat we een schaal hebben waarop veel mensen elkaar kunnen ontmoeten, met elkaar kunnen samenwerken. Je hebt ook steden die veel groter zijn en dan is de afstand tussen politiek en de stadsmakers veel groter. Ik denk dat we in deze stad een hele bijzondere samenwerking tot stand hebben gebracht. Ik denk wel dat er zulke vraagstukken zijn dat we dat moeten intensiveren.
Wat er goed gaat in onze stad op dit moment is dat we steeds scherper krijgen waar de echte knelpunten zitten. Waar de echte grootstedelijke opgaves liggen in de verschillende buurten, wijken en te ontwikkelen gebieden.
Het gaat erom dat we dus zoveel mogelijk andere partijen ook laten bijdragen om die stad van de toekomst te maken. En dat proberen we met de Amsterdamse aanpak, zoals we het een beetje hebben genoemd, zo goed mogelijk vorm te geven. Bottom-up, niet top-down en met aandacht voor alle partijen in dat proces.
Uiteindelijk doe je dat bouwen van die stad voor de toekomst natuurlijk voor de inwoners van deze stad en deze regio. En dat zul je altijd samen moeten doen. Dat kan geen enkele partij in zijn eentje.
De iCapital Award is een prijs vanuit de Europese Commissie die wordt uitgereikt aan de innovatieve hoofdstad van Europa. Nou, in 2016 hebben we die gewonnen als stad Amsterdam met allerlei partijen en we waren verbaasd. Want het was over onze eigen identiteit, dus DNA en hoe we samenwerken. Het mooie is wat we met die iCapital prijs hebben gedaan, is dat we eigenlijk die samenwerking hebben geprobeerd om nog verder dieper in die haarvaten van de stad te krijgen door de prijs eigenlijk door te geven via Amsterdammers Maak je Stad.
Ik ben Joep en ik ben een koekenbakker. En wij hebben een bakkerij om mensen die niet zelfstandig de aansluiting met de arbeidsmarkt kunnen vinden, om die eigenlijk aan het werk te helpen.
Ik ben de oprichter van Bloei en Groei. Dat is een groene oase in Stadsdeel Zuidoost om vrouwen te versterken.
Ik ben de oprichter van de Money School. En Money School maakt jongeren financieel bewust en weerbaar.
Als we een andere stad willen in de toekomst, eentje die inclusiever is, aan meer mensen plek biedt, waar iedereen in zekere soevereiniteit zich kan ontwikkelen, dan moeten we ook kijken naar de waardesystemen die we in de stad hebben. Dus we moeten naast de overheid en de staat ook de commons met elkaar begrijpen. En als we dat goed kunnen plaatsen als systeem, als mechanisme in de stad, dan denk ik ook dat die stad veel inclusiever wordt.
Great.
So I hope that gives a bit more context and inspiration, and hopefully, we can carry on this discussion in November and be joined by some of the participants who have been engaging today and asking questions. That's been, for me, I think, but also probably for Guido, a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, for us, it's been a great experience too for Insper. And I really hope that we can continue this discussion, not just in the courses that are coming and in November, but also in other opportunities like that we continue collaborating, not only in class, but also in other projects, more like urban projects. And I have the impression that it's going to be one of the great experiences ever. And well, thank you very much, Cornelia. Thank you very much, Guido, for your presentation. And thank you for this partnership, for this with Insper, and for this great product that we are having and offering. I think I will be part of it. So thank you everybody who are online with us for the great questions. And if you want to contact any of us, please send contact information in the chat, and we will answer back. And if there are any questions that have not been answered, we will send to the speakers, and they will answer personally. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you in November.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.